Hey guys, tonight we're leaving the cold, miserable huts of medieval peasants and diving headfirst into something somehow even more absurd. Victorian energy tonics, those miracle cures that promised vitality, stamina, and, as it turns out, a near-lethal dose of pure, pharmaceutical-grade cocaine. That's right. Tonight's journey is less Downton Abbey, more Downton Addict. A gentle slide down the laudanum-laced rabbit hole of 19th century wellness, where your doctor probably wore a monocle and prescribed you the contents of a modern evidence locker. Before we get started, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But honestly, only if you enjoy this kind of thing. Maybe leave a comment telling me if you've ever tried a modern energy shot and lived to regret it. Now, dim your lights, put on a fan for that soothing white noise, and make yourself comfortable. Wrap up tight. Victorian tonics might give you the chills, sweats, and existential dread, sometimes all at once. Let's pause for a second. Did Victorians really drink themselves into a state of caffeinated euphoria just to get through breakfast? What did invigorating syrup actually taste like? And was it mostly regret? Did anyone notice the side effects? Or did they just blame the furniture for being wobbly? Was every respectable Victorian mother basically running a pharmacy out of her kitchen? And was there ever a polite way to ask the vicar to stop grinding up the drapes? What happens when your doctor tells you that the only cure for exhaustion is a mysterious brown bottle with a label that reads, "Just trust me"? Congratulations. You've just woken up at 1875. The streets are foggy. Your pockets are full of glass vials. And you're pretty sure your pharmacist is trying to kill you, slowly, but with excellent customer service. Good luck. It's dawn, and you're already groggy. The Victorian sun peeks through your smog-choked window. Breakfast isn't eggs and bacon. It's a hearty glug of Dr. Frobisher's Electro-Invigorator, which tastes like sadness, turpentine, and a suspicious hint of lemon. Was this the original Red Bull? Or just a socially acceptable way to lose feeling in your face before noon? Let's set the scene. You, shivering in your chilly, wallpapered room, lurch out of bed, dragging the covers like a reluctant ghost. The floorboards creak. Somewhere downstairs, someone is already coughing. Victorian ambience. You shuffle to the wobbly kitchen table, and there it sits. A chunky glass bottle, the label peeling at the edges, boasting bold promises in ornate copperplate, guaranteed to restore vim, vigor, and all-around sparkle. Sparkle. At 6:15 a.m., even the font is over-caffeinated. You unscrew the stopper and pour a generous measure into a cloudy glass. Victorian tonics are not measured in milliliters or teaspoons, but in hope, bravado, and the reckless optimism of someone who has not yet read the side effects. The smell is bracing, a blend of industrial cleaner, licorice, and what might be disappointment. You pause, wondering, did anyone ever question if drinking this before breakfast was a bad idea? Or did they just trust the man with the mutton chops and medical degree purchased by mail order? The first sip hits your tongue like a revelation, but not the spiritual kind. Your throat burns. Your eyes water. For a brief, transcendent moment, you can taste every questionable decision that led humanity to this exact recipe. Still, the instructions are clear. Take one hearty dose before breakfast for optimal results. You take another. The flavor is somewhere between floor polish and ancient lemonade. But hey, at least it's working. You're awake now, and possibly vibrating slightly. By the time the rest of the household stumbles in, mother clutching her own tonic bottle, children bouncing on the edge of mania, you've begun to experience the first stage of Victorian invigoration. Mild confusion, followed by sudden, unexplainable energy. Your heart is beating with the optimism of a motivational speaker. You can almost hear your ancestors cheering from the mantelpiece. Get to work, you delicate modern. Across the table, your sibling chugs their own serving, makes a face, and starts reciting lines of Byron at double speed. Breakfast, Victorian style, is not for the faint of heart. The bottle promises so much: relief from torpor, rejuvenation of the vital humours, and a healthy complexion, presumably achieved by sweating profusely through your only shirt. And it delivers, in the sense that you are now more alert than you've ever been in your life. Possibly even a little bit panicked. Who needs coffee when you can rocket through the morning on a wave of pharmaceutical-grade enthusiasm? Of course, the Victorians are nothing if not practical. Alongside your tonic, you may enjoy a few cubes of bread, some stewed prunes, and a lecture on the dangers of idleness. But nothing, not even the threat of moral decline, can dampen the effect of your daily draft. As you head out into the morning fog, face tingling, fingertips numb, mind racing with both ambition and existential dread, you realize that breakfast is less a meal and more a gamble. Will today be the day you finally finish your memoirs, invent the light bulb, or just spend 3 hours alphabetizing the pantry? Nobody knows. Least of all you. By the time noon arrives, you've already lived a full Victorian day. Maybe your hands are shaking. Maybe your right eye is twitching. But one thing is certain. You are, for better or worse, invigorated. Congratulations. You've survived the morning, and you've done it the Victorian way, one questionable tonic at a time. Sleep well, and try not to think about what's in tomorrow's bottle. Step into the apothecary, where the shelves sag under jars of mysterious powders, and every bottle is labelled Elixir of Life, probably. Your local pharmacist greets you with a grin that says, "Trust me, I've only slightly poisoned half the neighbourhood." Ever wondered what it's like to buy cocaine from a man with a handlebar mustache and no scruples? The door creaks open, and instantly you're hit with a wall of aromas, something sharp, something sweet, and something that, if we're honest, probably should have been thrown out when Queen Victoria was still a teenager. The air buzzes with possibility, risk, and more than a whiff of ammonia. You wipe your feet on a rug that claims to be Persian but looks like it once belonged to a sick dog. Welcome to the Victorian pharmacy, part medical emporium, part chemistry experiment, part Victorian fever dream. Your pharmacist, let's call him Mr. Witherspoon, is the picture of respectability, at least from the knees up. His shoes are suspiciously sticky. His apron bears stains in colours not found in nature, and his hair is so thoroughly greased it could be used to lubricate a steam engine. But it's the moustache that really sells it. Enormous, waxed to sharp points, and twitching with a kind of barely contained glee. He twirls it absently as you approach the counter, eyeing you like a man assessing whether you'd make a decent lab assistant or just another cautionary tale. "Good morning," he says, voice oozing confidence and the faintest note of regret. "How can I assist your wellness today? Headache? Fatigue? General malaise? Or perhaps you'd just like to experience the full range of human emotion before lunch?" On the shelves behind him, bottles gleam in the weak sunlight. Some are labelled with things like nerve reviver or tincture of fizz. Others simply read experimental, do not sell, except to friends. You've never been so uncertain about your health or your odds of survival. He reaches for a tall, cloudy bottle. "This one," he whispers, "is my latest formulation, guaranteed to revive the weary, energize the listless, and, on occasion, stop time altogether. Contains only the finest imported coca leaves, French wine, and a proprietary blend of things best left undescribed. You notice his hands shake, ever so slightly. Maybe it's the excitement. Maybe it's just the after effects of too much sampling. Was there a point in history when quality control meant if you can still walk, it's probably fine? You scan the shelves, eyeing the competition. Dr. McGillicuddy's liver enhancer, colour, alarming. Bishop's cordial of tranquility, main ingredient, laudanum. And revitalizing brain dust, which seems to be nothing but ground glass and hope. Children wander in, clutching pennies, hoping for a licorice stick and a whiff of whatever's bubbling in the back. The pharmacist is equal parts scientist, showman, and very enthusiastic gambler. Behind the counter, strange equipment bubbles and hisses, mortars and pestles, mysterious brass scales, a hand-cranked pill roller. It's a Willy Wonka's factory for adults with chronic pain and trust issues. Mr. Witherspoon assures you he's a professional. He attended at least 2 lectures, owns a copy of Gray's Anatomy, and once shook hands with a surgeon. Was Victorian medicine just a series of bold guesses? Or was it an elaborate way to turn everyday complaints into low-level hallucinations? You hand over your prescription, a slip of paper with your doctor's illegible scrawl, probably reading, "Just give them something, and hope for the best." Mr. Witherspoon nods knowingly, scoops something fizzing into a blue glass bottle, and slaps on a label with a flourish. Guaranteed safe, within reason. He includes instructions that are either impossibly vague or wildly optimistic. 1 spoonful every hour or as needed. Avoid heavy machinery and all forms of decision-making. As you leave, you can't help but wonder, has anyone survived a full course of treatment? Do they have a loyalty program or just a punch card for local undertakers? Was the pharmacist a healer or just the most successful experimenter in town? You step back onto the foggy street, bottle in hand, the faint echo of Mr. Witherspoon's laugh ringing in your ears. One thing is certain. In the Victorian era, your pharmacist wasn't just a provider of remedies. He was the gatekeeper to adventure, disaster, and, if you were lucky, just enough cocaine to make it through another British winter. The streets are lined with painted wagons, hawking every flavour of nerve syrup. Who do you trust? Professor Pumpernickel's pep potion, or Dr. Sparkle's brain dust? Each promises instant vitality, and all of them are, chemically, a lawsuit waiting to happen. Is there any dignity in reading testimonials from people named A Grateful Widow or S. Badger Esquire? Let's set the scene. You step out into the clattering cobblestone ruckus of a Victorian market day, your mind foggy from last night's invigorator, and your wallet barely hanging on after this morning's remedy. The air itself seems charged, partly with possibility, mostly with caffeine and trace amounts of something that's definitely illegal today. On every corner, a new wagon sparkles with fresh paint and dubious claims. Their banners flap heroically in the smoggy breeze, each promising a stronger, faster, happier you. You wander past Professor Pumpernickel's cart, where a small crowd gathers, hypnotized by his booming voice and the glint of glass bottles lined up like an artillery of optimism. He tips his hat, winks, and launches into a routine that's equal parts medicine and music hall comedy. Fatigue, lassitude, or simply existential horror, he calls. Step right up. My pep potion is made from the finest Peruvian leaves, Indian spices, and a soupçon of something French you can't pronounce. You watch as he downs a shot himself, eyes watering, mustache quivering, and then launches into a tap dance, So vigorous you wonder if the potion's main ingredient is pure adrenaline. Across the street, Dr. Sparkle stands atop his own wagon, dressed entirely in white, looking suspiciously like a rejected magician. He tosses packets of brain dust into the crowd. Each pouch sparkles ominously in the afternoon sun, promising to restore memory, banish ennui, and make your poetry better than Byron's. A woman catches one, sniffs it, and immediately recites the alphabet backward, which may or may not have been the intended effect. The rivalry is fierce. Every wagon is staffed by assistants in matching waistcoats, tossing out samples like confetti. You try a sip of Mrs. Havisham's restorative syrup and immediately forget your own address. Someone shoves a flyer into your hand, boasting a testimonial from a reformed invalid. The testimonial reads, "After just 3 bottles, I was able to run a marathon, knit an entire wardrobe, and reconcile with my estranged cousin." Thank you, Dr. Sparkle. You wonder if anyone ever wrote a negative review, or if all the dissatisfied customers simply didn't survive the taste test. Every tonic has a story, guaranteed by science. But the science is always science in quotes, and the footnotes just lead to more exclamation points. Endorsed by leading physicians, whose names are always suspiciously hard to verify. Some promise to cure nervous exhaustion, general malaise, sad spleen, and tired feet. One claims to awaken the vital humours and also make you better at chess. You suspect that at least 2 of these elixirs are the same product in different bottles, and a third is just pond water with a suggestive label. Children buzz around, clutching free samples, and dogs bark suspiciously at a wagon where the air shimmers in unnatural hues. At the far end, a sign proclaims, "Tonic Showdown. Who will triumph?" You're invited to cast your vote after trying at least 3 products. You sample Reverend Mulberry's godly elixir. Contains traces of gin, traces of opium, and possibly a dash of the Old Testament. The effect is immediate. Your ears ring, your teeth feel rubbery. And for a few seconds, you're certain you can smell the color blue. By midday, the market is a blur of energy, laughter, and side effects. Testimonials are read aloud by paid actors and the occasional half-awake customer. The showdown is less about which tonic works best, and more about who can shout the loudest and offer the best hat. At the end of the day, you stagger home with a bag full of bottles, none of which you can remember buying. Your pockets are empty, your heart is racing, and your faith in humanity's self-preservation instincts is, well, also racing. But was there any dignity? Maybe not. Was there fun? Absolutely. In the Victorian era, the only thing more competitive than the tonic trade was the race to stay awake long enough to try them all. And if you survived, you got to write your own testimonial, assuming you could still hold a pen. Breakfast time. Toast is fine, but the real meal is a spoonful of patent syrup for modern weariness, dribbled directly onto your food. Does it pair well with jam? Or is the secret ingredient just regret and cocaine? And how many children are bouncing off the wallpaper by 9 a.m.? Let's step into your average Victorian kitchen, where the stove is sputtering, the milk is probably turning, and the table is set for an experience that lands somewhere between continental breakfast and experimental chemistry. The family gathers, rubbing sleep out of their eyes, and, for a lucky few, the after effects of last night's relaxing tonic. You stare down a plate of bread so dense it could double as masonry. But you're not here for the bread. You're here for the good stuff. The sticky, sweet, slightly ominous bottle of patent syrup for modern weariness. The breakfast condiment that promises to change your entire day, possibly your entire personality. The bottle itself looks innocent enough, if you ignore the fine print, guaranteed to banish ennui and tooth enamel. The syrup oozes out in a viscous, amber ribbon, somewhere between molasses and mystery. You drizzle it over your toast, already glistening with yesterday's butter and a heroic smear of preserves. The flavor is complex. First comes the sugar, then a jolt of bitterness, and finally a faint chemical tang, like the ghost of lemons past. Did the Victorians have taste buds, or did they just cultivate an ability to ignore the signs of imminent disaster? Children wait eagerly for their portion, spoons held out like pilgrims at the altar. With a motherly sigh, you ladle out doses, each child's toast now crowned with a glistening lake of syrup. The instructions say 1 spoonful. The reality? Let's just say dosing is more art than science, especially when your youngest has already licked their plate clean and is eyeing the bottle with dangerous intent. By 8:15, the transformation is underway. The children have gone from groggy to vibrating, inventing new forms of hopscotch and attempting to recite all the kings and queens of England in reverse order. The dog has retreated under the table, convinced that breakfast is now a competitive sport. You, meanwhile, feel your own heart rate ticking up, like someone just installed a tiny coal-fired engine in your chest. Breakfast has become less of a meal and more of a launch sequence. The label promises endurance, optimism, and improved moral fiber. In practice, it delivers a full-body jolt and the lingering suspicion that you can now see through time. The adults try to maintain composure, sipping tea, nodding thoughtfully, and pretending their vision isn't swimming. Outside, the milkman passes by, pausing to peer in and wonder, for the 15th time this week, why your curtains seem to flutter even when the windows are closed. As the syrup takes effect, the house grows louder. Spoons clatter. Children practice their cartwheels, indoors, of course. Someone tries to balance a teacup on their head, and when it shatters, the only response is wild applause. There's a brief debate about whether syrup is better on toast or just straight from the bottle. But before a consensus can be reached, the youngest bolts from the room in a blur of energy. It's 8:42 a.m., and the entire household is already having an out-of-body experience. You wonder if there was ever a warning about this in the etiquette manuals. Is it polite to ask for a second helping of patent syrup? Or is that just code for my day job is now professional fidget spinner? And how, exactly, did Victorian employers cope with a workforce whose breakfast routine would terrify a modern HR department? Did they all just agree to speak a little faster, blink a little more, and hope nobody remembered who set fire to the curtains? As the morning chaos peaks, you survey the scene. Toast crumbs everywhere, syrup trails on every surface, and a room full of people ready to conquer the world, or, at minimum, run to the park and back before school starts. The dog emerges, tail between its legs, and everyone is already planning their next dose. But the beauty of the Victorian breakfast isn't just the chaos, it's the hope. Each syrupy bite is a small act of faith in a brighter, more energetic day. And if it all goes sideways, you can always blame it on the toast. That's breakfast in the age of tonics. Unpredictable, highly stimulating, and absolutely unforgettable, just like the Victorians themselves. Open the kitchen cupboard, and behold, rows of bottles, each one stronger than the last. Mother's headache drops are really don't talk to me before I've had my laudanum. Is there an etiquette for sharing your cocaine tonic at tea, or do you just wait until Great Aunt Edna falls asleep? You're standing in the heart of the Victorian home, the kitchen, where order is maintained not by discipline or prayer, but by a pharmaceutical arsenal that could fuel an all-night rave in modern Berlin. The cupboard doors creak open, revealing a secret rainbow of bottles. tall and squat, clear and brown, with labels that read soothing syrup, restorative drops, and, with a wink, for mother's private use. This is less a medicine cabinet, more an early attempt at domestic chemistry. And mother is the undisputed alchemist. Here's the routine. The morning is a blur of small crises. There are socks to mend, arguments to mediate, and a household to whip into shape before breakfast is even cold. No wonder mother has developed the kind of composure that can only be described as chemically assisted. She selects her bottle carefully. Never the same one 2 days in a row. Monday might call for Dr. Peabody's soothing elixir, now with extra morphine, while Tuesday demands Missus Forthright's patent pep, contains traces of enthusiasm and a hint of belladonna. Each label features promises as grand as any fortune teller, banishes cares, restores calm, makes family tolerable, and small print best ignored. Family members know better than to ask questions. Headache, dear, is code for I see you're on bottle number 2. The children, wise beyond their years, tiptoe carefully until mother's mood rises with the level of the liquid in her teacup. Father, reading the paper, pretends not to notice as mother knocks back her drops, eyes briefly glazing over like a woman remembering her youth before the invention of laundry. Only great Aunt Edna, nearly immune to mortal intervention, occasionally pipes up. When I was your age, we cured headaches by rubbing mud on our faces and screaming into a pillow. Edna is quickly ignored, but the real question, one that Victorian etiquette manuals never quite address, is this. How do you handle sharing? If the vicar pops by for a chat, is it polite to offer him a teaspoon of invigorating compound, or is that reserved for close friends and people you want to see painting the garden fence at midnight? Does mother top up her guest's tea with a dash of tonic syrup, or does she slyly refill only her own cup, saving the strong stuff for the afternoon slump? The social lives of Victorian women run on more than just gossip. The kitchen cupboard becomes a place of clandestine solidarity, a silent nod between neighbours, a bottle slipped across the table, a secret handshake disguised as try a little of this. Dear, it works wonders. At sewing circles, the decanter might pass more times than the sugar. Every hostess knows exactly who prefers the gentle pick-me-up and who needs the stuff that peels paint. These little rituals keep the wheels of domestic life turning, and the stories flying faster than the children running laps around the table. Of course, the line between medicinal and party trick blurs rapidly. By 2 p.m., the house may be cleaner, the soup may be saltier, and mother may be on her third wind. The side effects are obvious only in hindsight. An hour spent dusting the same shelf, an unexpected attempt at poetry, the sudden urge to bake 4 dozen scones just in case. If anyone notices, they keep it to themselves. After all, everyone has their coping mechanisms, and not all of them come with a cork. As evening draws near, the cupboard is carefully closed, bottles shuffled to disguise the day's consumption. The family gathers for tea, some in higher spirits than others. The children sense their moment and request just a taste, but are swiftly redirected to bread and jam. Mother smiles, serene, knowing tomorrow's bottle is already waiting. In the end, the real secret isn't the stash. It's the unspoken agreement that sometimes, to make it through the chaos of Victorian life, everyone needs a little help from their friends, even if those friends come in glass bottles with suspiciously faded labels. Victorian doctors had a simple solution for everything. More tonic, more often, and please pay in cash. Were these men medical professionals or enthusiastic drug dealers with better handwriting? Take 3 spoonfuls, and if symptoms persist, start a new religion, You find yourself seated in a physician's office, a term used loosely, since the office is also the waiting room, the dispensary. And, during slow weeks, his brother-in-law's billiards parlour. A heavy velvet curtain separates you from the rest of the queue. The air is thick with the scent of camphor, coal smoke, and professional secrecy. The doctor himself sits behind a desk, cluttered with ledgers, medical tomes, and a jar marked interesting specimens. His white coat is spotless. His sideburns are magnificent, and his penmanship could make a bank clerk weep. He looks you over with the practiced squint of a man who once read a pamphlet about germs and remains unconvinced. "Symptoms?" he asks, already reaching for his prescription pad. You list your ailments: fatigue, foggy mind, the vague sense of existential dread that comes from living in a city where horses outnumber sanitation workers. He nods gravely. "Ah, yes. Classic case of humoral imbalance. Only one thing for it, a vigorous regimen of tonic, and, perhaps, some fresh air, but mostly tonic." He scribbles in looping script, 3 lines, maybe 4, and tears the page with a flourish. The instructions are elaborate, specific, and only partially related to your complaint. Take 1 tablespoon before breakfast, another at midday, and a final dose if you plan on reading poetry. Avoid staring at mirrors for too long. He slides the slip across the desk, already moving on to his next patient. A woman with a sore ankle who leaves with a small bottle labeled Elixir of Fortitude, guaranteed non-explosive. You take your prescription to the chemist, who glances at the paper and smirks. Ah, Dr. Hargreaves. His handwriting is even more creative than his diagnoses. Behind the counter, shelves bow beneath the weight of jars and vials. Reviving cordial, vitality drops, and syrup of persistent good cheer. The pharmacist expertly mixes a concoction that fizzes, smokes, and, upon tasting, reminds you faintly of burnt licorice and shoe polish. You wonder if anyone, anywhere, knows what's actually in these brews. The beauty of Victorian medicine is its confidence. Doctors prescribe with the bravado of men who know the world will be unrecognizable in 50 years, and they are determined to leave a mark, preferably in cobalt blue glass. Sometimes they add a pinch of this or a dash of that, all under the broad heading of empirical research. Today's prescription is tomorrow's cautionary tale. You're not sure whether to be reassured by your doctor's certainty or alarmed that his most common cure is something in a bottle. What passes for medical innovation is often little more than a game of trial and error. One patient's invigoration is another's surprise week in bed with the curtains drawn. Some doctors push the boundaries further. Advertisements appear in the penny press boasting cures for melancholy, remedies for hysteria, and astonishing results with tincture of wild imagination. The more reputable physicians stick to tonics. The rest dabble in opiates, arsenic, or, in extreme cases, motivational speaking. Payment is always up front, of course, either in coin, barter, or, if you're lucky, a promise not to sue. The medical bills pile up, as do the empty bottles. If the cure works, the doctor is a genius. If it doesn't, well, there's always the fallback diagnosis of incurable nerves. The only thing riskier than ignoring a Victorian prescription is following it to the letter. Every so often, the doctor himself is forced to sample his own wares. Strictly for research, he insists, and you can't help but notice his growing enthusiasm for his own handwriting. "I prescribe," he says. "Therefore I am." At the end of the day, you realize that in Victorian times, the best medicine was hope in a bottle, administered liberally, paid for in cash, and washed down with a wink and a prayer. If all else fails, start a new religion, and hope they don't ask too many questions about the side effects. The upper crust has its own version of wellness. Afternoon tea now features cakes, gossip, and a genteel dash of pure pharmaceutical chaos. Was Queen Victoria really sipping coca wine, or was that just her way of handling Parliament? Step into the parlour, where the sunlight slants through leaded glass and everything smells faintly of violets, expensive furniture polish, and low-level scandal. You are not just anyone. You are someone with a title, or at least with enough old money to pretend you have one. The tea service is a silver spectacle, piled high with delicate cakes, pale sandwiches, and, incongruously, a glistening bottle of Vin Mariani, a restorative tonic wine straight from Paris, famous for containing the invigorating essence of the coca leaf. In other words, cocaine, but in a bottle that matches the wallpaper. The ladies arrive in a rustle of silk and subtle anxiety, hats perched like birds of prey. The men, if present, are already 2 glasses deep, discussing foreign policy and whether a monocle counts as eye protection. Conversation floats on a cloud of banter, and the clinking of teaspoons is rivaled only by the quiet fizz from the decanter. There is nothing so quintessentially Victorian as transforming a perfectly innocent afternoon ritual into a polite pharmaceutical experiment. Servants glide around, refilling teacups and offering slices of seed cake, but the real action is in the pouring. A generous splash of coca wine, artfully mixed into the cup, is all it takes to liven up even the most tedious gossip. "Did you hear about the Duchess?" whispers Lady Crowthorne, eyebrow arched so high it threatens to detach. She started speaking fluent Italian after just 2 bottles. Uncanny. You nod, suddenly aware that your foot has developed a rhythm entirely of its own. The conversation shifts seamlessly from the weather to restorative regimes. One guest swears by Morley's malt extract with coca, ideal for combating low spirits and an excess of children. Another, not to be outdone, claims that a daily spoonful of Pickford's Euphoria cordial is responsible for her glowing complexion and unshakable optimism in the face of 3 failed investments and a husband who collects beetles. It's a curious thing, this genteel pursuit of wellness. Nobody mentions side effects, of course, only the sudden brightness of mind, the newfound vigor for croquet, and a willingness to consider piano concertos at speeds previously reserved for military marches. Someone's mother-in-law, it said, completed her memoirs, wallpapered a corridor, and learned all of Greek mythology in a single fevered weekend. Was it talent, or just the secret ingredient in her afternoon sherry? You sip your tea, feeling a wave of confidence and an urgent need to alphabetize the entire bookshelf. Across the room, Sir Lionel declares his intention to run for Parliament, a phrase that now feels suspiciously literal. Even the family, dogs, having licked a few stray drops, are eyeing the tennis court with wild ambition. Afternoon tea is less a meal and more a launch pad. But let's not forget the most important presence, Her Majesty herself. Queen Victoria's own doctor once famously recommended Vin Mariani for fatigue and ennui. Was this just polite code for the government is exhausting? Or did the Queen truly believe that the secret to empire was hiding in the bottom of a Bordeaux bottle with a little something extra from South America? Either way, the palace ran on more than tradition and scones. It ran on the best chemical confidence money could buy. By the time the final cups are cleared, cheeks are flushed, tongues are loosened, and the parlour hums with the promise of new hobbies, grand ideas, and letters you'll definitely regret sending in the morning. Nobody admits it, but everyone knows. The only thing more addictive than the gossip is the tea. So, as you retire from the table, you realize that wellness, at least for the Victorian elite, was never really about moderation. It was about keeping up with the neighbours, outpacing the parliament, and never, ever letting your cup run dry. Victorian children are a handful, especially after a double dose of Mrs. Winterbottom's youth elixir. Did parents actually sleep, or did they just vibrate quietly until morning? And why does every child's tonic come with a warning label and a small bell? Step into the Victorian nursery, a room where the wallpaper is peeling, the rocking horse is haunted, and the air is thick with the mingled scents of lavender water and industrial-strength hope. The morning begins with a ritual as sacred as any family prayer. A spoonful of youth elixir doled out by a parent whose only goal is to survive breakfast with their sanity and hairline mostly intact. You might expect a children's tonic to be gentle, subtle, maybe a dash of honey, a whiff of chamomile. But the Victorians were not subtle people. Mrs. Winterbottom's concoction boasts a dizzying blend of nerve tonics, mild sedatives, and, reading between the lines, enough opium to anesthetize a small goat. The bottle's cheery label promises calm for body and mind, and features a picture of a cherubic child, beaming with the fixed smile of someone who hasn't blinked since Tuesday. Dosing is more performance art than science. The instructions suggest 1 teaspoon, or more if the child is spirited. Every parent interprets this as keep pouring until the walls stop shaking. Spoons clink, little mouths open, and within minutes, the children are either bouncing off the wainscoting or drifting dreamily into a state of chemically induced zen. There's no in-between, and then the bell. Each bottle comes with a tiny, silvery bell on a string, a gentle reminder, perhaps, to ring for help if the child's energy surpasses safe Victorian levels. Or maybe it's there so parents can locate their offspring after the 3rd round of Ring-a-Ring-a-Roses ends with someone escaping out a window. More than one mother has been seen scanning the hedges for a missing child, ears tuned for that faint tinkle, hoping to retrieve them before dinner, or at least before the neighbours notice. Parents, meanwhile, swap tips over the breakfast table. My Henry can recite the Latin alphabet backward after 2 doses, says one, beaming. My Agnes hasn't stopped polishing the banister since Thursday, says another, with the haunted look of a woman who has lost all her shoes to a 7-year-old on a mission. The secret, they all agree, is to strike a balance between lively and untraceable by dog. But does anyone sleep? That's the million-pound question. By nightfall, the house settles into uneasy quiet. Some children pass out, drooling into their pillows with a faint smell of licorice and victory. Others remain upright, wide-eyed, whispering grand plans to imaginary friends and the family cat. The parents, jittery from their own tonic regime, hover in a twilight zone between exhaustion and existential dread, listening for footsteps, laughter, or the telltale crash of something valuable being repurposed as a musical instrument. Of course, not every tonic is created equal. Some claim to calm nerves, ease digestion, and promote saintly obedience, all for the price of a halfpenny and whatever's left of your parental authority. The warning labels are optimistic at best, may cause vivid dreams, sudden sprinting, or temporary invisibility. No one asks what temporary means, and the pharmacist is conveniently vague. In the morning, the cycle begins again. Bottles are wiped clean, bells retied, and hopeful parents line up for refills, trading stories like war veterans. Was the Victorian child healthier for it? History is suspiciously silent on this point, but family portraits from the era always feature children who look both exhausted and faintly surprised. So, next time you hear a bell jingling in the night, remember, somewhere, a Victorian child is either peacefully dreaming or planning a small, syrup-fueled revolution. And their parents? They're just grateful for one quiet moment, however it's achieved. It's Saturday night, and the drawing room is buzzing, literally. Bottles are passed, laughter erupts, and everyone is full of vim. Is this a party? Or just a group anxiety attack in three-piece suits? Step into the Victorian parlour at the stroke of 8, where the wallpaper is a little too lively, and every chair has a nervous energy of its own. The piano tinkles in the corner, played by a gentleman whose foot keeps tapping faster than the tempo. Candles flicker, casting jittery shadows that dart up the walls like caffeinated ghosts. The hosts greet you with the air of people who haven't slept since Thursday, but they assure you this will be an evening to remember, or at least one you won't be able to sit still through. The drinks table groans under the weight of glassware, ambition. There's Professor Nimble's Excelsior elixir, Vigor Drops Supreme, and a punch bowl so lively it's been declared a fire hazard by 3 separate aunts. The punch is a proprietary blend, meaning, in practice, it contains everything left in the cupboard, at least 2 kinds of alcohol, and a mystery ingredient that might be quinine or might be whatever fell in last time the cat jumped up there. The clinking of bottles is nearly as constant as the chatter. You find yourself handed a tumbler of something that smells like peppermint and burnt matches, and you're assured it will put hair on your chest or at least make you forget what day it is. Someone else passes you, Mrs. Blenkinsop's nervous tonic, with a wink and a warning to avoid operating carriages or making major life decisions for at least 12 hours. Soon the effects kick in. Conversations go from polite to wildly optimistic in record time. One guest launches into a tale about their time in the Crimea, only to be interrupted by a woman convinced she's just invented a better kind of umbrella. By the fireplace, a group debates the merits of electric light, gaslight, and simply staring into the void. Across the room, 2 cousins attempt a waltz but end up inventing what future generations will know as jazzercise. The best thing about a tonic party is the sheer unpredictability. At any moment, someone may suggest an impromptu poetry competition, an indoor foot race, or a séance, though nobody can sit still long enough to commune with anyone slower than a Victorian housefly. Laughter erupts at odd intervals, sometimes because of an actual joke, sometimes just because the punch bowl burped. As the evening wears on, the drawing room becomes a bubbling cauldron of energy, ideas, and questionable medical advice. "You know what would really fix that headache?" shouts someone from behind the fern. Another round of pick-me-up potion. Glasses are refilled. Someone brings out a tray of tiny cakes, each frosted with fortified jam. The children, wisely exiled to the nursery, peek down the staircase with wide eyes and even wider ears, having learned long ago that grown-up parties are where the real chaos happens. Aunt Mildred, who's always 2 steps ahead, starts passing around her own concoction. "Family recipe," she whispers, which in Victorian parlance means, "Please don't ask what's in it." The guests cheerfully oblige, toasting to Queen and country and the vague hope that no one will try to sing again. At midnight, the crowd is divided between those reciting Shakespeare at top speed and those reorganizing the host's bookshelves by color, height, and perceived literary ambition. The dog hides under the settee, and the parlor plants seem to lean a little farther from the action. When the party finally breaks up, guests spill into the night, hearts pounding, heads spinning, and all quietly swearing they've never felt more alive. Was it camaraderie, chemistry, or just a communal bout of hyperactivity? Hard to say. In the Victorian world, socializing wasn't just about keeping up appearances. It was about keeping up, period. And as you walk home, hands trembling and thoughts racing, you realize there's only one cure for a Victorian tonic party. An entire Sunday spent hiding from the world, preferably in a room without any bottles. Feeling low? Don't worry. The answer is more tonic. When in doubt, try mixing them all together and hope for the best. How many Victorians discovered synergy by accident and ended up inventing jazz? Let's take you to a typical Victorian evening. when the world outside is all gaslight and fog, and the world inside is also gaslight and fog, but with better wallpaper. You're sitting by the hearth, weary from a day of living dangerously close to open sewers and responsibility. The solution, according to every advertisement in the paper and every relative over the age of 30, is simple. Pour yourself a generous measure of paper, whatever's in the medicine cabinet, and see what happens. Victorians are nothing if not enterprising. If one tonic promises a mild sense of euphoria, 2 must surely offer enlightenment, and 3 will presumably launch you into the astral plane. The miracle of self-medication is less about precision and more about bravado. Somewhere in the middle of the sideboard sits a collection of bottles, fortifying elixir, soothing drops, concentrated vigor, and the ever-popular Dr. Moxley's opiated linctus. Nobody remembers which one was for digestion and which one was for existential despair. So best to take a bit of each, just to be safe. The kitchen is transformed into a laboratory. You line up glasses, uncork bottles, and start pouring with the measured confidence of a man who once read an article titled "The Wonders of Modern Chemistry." The liquids swirl, some fizz, some smoke. One briefly catches fire, but it's quickly extinguished by sheer willpower and a decorative tea towel. You ignore the warnings about not to be taken internally if under the age of 40 or in possession of a functional liver. Once the concoction is ready, you raise a glass and toast to better days ahead. The taste is indescribable. A carnival of herbs, sugar, a note of petroleum, and something that could be nutmeg or possibly regret. It tingles all the way down, and for a moment, you're convinced you've invented a new emotion. The side effects begin immediately. Your left foot goes numb, your heart starts composing waltzes, and your memory of algebra improves dramatically, if briefly. Self-medication isn't a solo pursuit. Friends and family join in, eager to share their own homemade remedies. "Try this one, it's good for the nerves," says Uncle Percy, whose nerves haven't been spotted since the Crimean War. Cousin Lila adds a dash of her own vitality serum, which smells like turpentine and old secrets. Before long, everyone's sipping and swapping recipes, convinced that the right combination will unlock the mysteries of the universe, or at least make Mondays less terrifying. The Victorians invent synergy without realizing it. Did anyone expect to discover the roots of jazz, surrealist poetry, and interpretive dance all in the same night? Probably not. But when your heart is beating in 7/8 time, and your thoughts come out as spontaneous rhyming couplets, it's hard not to feel you're on the verge of something big. Some swear they can hear colours, others decide to start a new religion based on the teachings of the family cat. Of course, not every experiment ends in revelation. There are side effects, palpitations, insomnia, the sudden urge to alphabetize the pantry. Occasionally, someone decides to see if tonic for horses is really just a suggestion. The next morning is often spent piecing together what happened, who moved the piano, and why someone wrote Eureka in mustard on the drawing room curtains. Yet there's a strange optimism to the whole affair. Self-medication, Victorian style, is about hope in a bottle, sometimes misguided, always enthusiastic. It's the belief that better living is only a sip away, and that if one dose is good, several must surely be miraculous. So as you settle into bed, thoughts still racing, remember, the real miracle isn't the tonic itself. It's that, against all odds and medical advice, you're still here to try again tomorrow. And who knows? With a little more synergy, you might just invent something else, if not jazz, then at least a story to tell at the next tonic party. Browse the penny catalogues and discover a world of opportunity. For £1, you can order a mystery bottle from someone in Wales. Delivery is guaranteed, but so is a lifetime of regret. Was this the start of online shopping addiction, or just a cry for help? It's a rainy Victorian afternoon, and you're stretched out by the coal stove, leafing through the latest penny catalogue. The pages are thin, and the promises even thinner. Each advert is a masterpiece of hyperbole, with swirling fonts and testimonials from people with suspiciously vague addresses. R.H. of Kent reports miraculous results. A lady in Devon says her corns were banished, her mind restored, and her second husband more agreeable than ever. One can't help but wonder, did anyone ever write in to complain? Or did they simply expire before their letter reached the publisher? You feel the urge to better yourself. Perhaps you're plagued by neurasthenia, the vapors, or the general malaise that comes from being alive in a world with more cholera than coffee. The solution is at your fingertips. You circle an ad for Dr. Llewellyn's tonic of tenacity. By post only. Satisfaction assured. For a single shilling and the cost of a stamp, you can secure a bottle of, well, something. The ad is vague, listing ingredients as herbal secrets, purest stimulants, and a proprietary blend known only to the druids of Brecon. The sense of adventure is irresistible. The process is both thrilling and mildly terrifying. You fill out the little order slip, counting your coins twice, and post it off to a mysterious address that may or may not exist on any reputable map. Now comes the wait. Days or weeks in which you alternate between wild anticipation and creeping dread. What will arrive? Will it work? Will it arrive at all, or will you be forced to seek your fortunes with a different bottle next month? The parcel arrives one Thursday morning. Brown paper, twine, and a whiff of something herbal, medicinal, and slightly radioactive. The postman hands it over with a knowing look, the same way modern delivery drivers eye suspiciously heavy packages marked as seen on TV. You take it inside, carefully snip the string, and gaze upon your prize. A bottle of deep green glass, label handwritten and just blurry enough to be legally non-binding. Instructions are delightfully cryptic. Take as needed or as desired. Not for children, pets, or those who plan on operating complicated machinery, including but not limited to penny farthings, butter churns, or anything involving goats. The liquid inside glistens, daring you to sip, gulp, or at least sniff. The taste is unforgettable. It's botanical, pungent, and lingers with the kind of aftertaste that makes you question your recent life decisions. Soon you realize you are not alone. All across Britain, households are experimenting with the same postal roulette. A neighbour pops in to compare notes. Her mail-order tonic claims to restore harmony and vigour, but so far has only succeeded in giving her a mild rash and a talent for reciting Chaucer at high speeds. Rumours swirl of entire villages hooked on mail-order revival drops, with the occasional scandal when a shipment turns out to be 90% gin and 10% wishful thinking. The real thrill, however, is the shopping itself. The act of picking a tonic, filling out the order slip, and awaiting your destiny in the post is dangerously addictive. Every new catalogue promises the miracle cure you didn't know you needed, or at least something to break up the monotony of another damp Wednesday. Was this the first glimmer of online retail therapy? A steady drip of anticipation, satisfaction, and buyer's remorse. Inevitably, your cupboards fill with half-empty bottles. Some remedies tingle, some fizzle, some glow in the dark. You keep ordering, convinced the next one will be the one. The mailman, now on first-name terms, asks after your health with a twinkle of shared conspiracy. In the end, you're left with a shelf of dubious hope, a slightly emptier wallet, and a new appreciation for in-person shopping. But deep down, the real tonic was the journey, and maybe, just maybe, the lesson not to order anything that promises to fix your entire life for a shilling plus postage. Victorian advertising is an art form, promising vigour, courage, and a boldness unknown to man. The, small print says, may cause sudden belief in ghosts. Are those testimonials, or just very early Yelp reviews written under the influence? Open any Victorian newspaper and you'll find yourself lost in a fever dream of fonts and promises, all crowded together like desperate actors at a casting call for best miracle cure in Britain. Full-page spreads extol the virtues of Dr. Tiddlewink's peerless elixir, with the kind of breathless enthusiasm usually reserved for royal weddings and train derailments. The illustrations alone are worth the price of the paper. Bottles shining with celestial rays, mustachioed men leaping over fences, women clutching bouquets and looking vaguely relieved that their liver is, at last, in harmonious accord. If the science is suspect, the poetry is unparalleled. Tonics are specially formulated to fortify the vital spirits, expunge phlegmatic humours, and induce a cheerful disposition, all for a price so low it's practically an insult to your self-esteem. 1. Ad for Professor Sparks' stimulant drops promises efficacy, elegance, and electrical sensations hitherto unknown outside the laboratory. The ingredients list is helpfully vague, a blend of selected roots, essences, and imported wonders. The fine print warns, may induce mild euphoria, sudden bravado, and occasional belief in one's own immortality. Testimonials fill every inch of the page, and they are, frankly, poetry in motion. I was a shadow of a man, writes S. Badger, Esquire. But after a fortnight with Dr. Gumption's courage compound, I wrestled a sheep and reconciled with my mother-in-law. A grateful widow writes, I had not danced since the coronation, but one spoonful restored both my ankles and my faith in mankind. Whether these are genuine reviews or just the fevered imaginings of a copywriter with a bottle under his desk is anyone's guess. No modern algorithm could sort fact from fiction when a product claims to restore colour to the cheeks, vim to the bones, and boldness to the brain. Sometimes, the advertisements verge into the surreal. Marvel at the transformation, one urges, next to a before and after portrait so dramatically altered you'd swear the subject changed species. Never again fear the fog, another claims, with Dr. Fenwick's vapor banishing syrup. The ad helpfully neglects to mention that the main effect is temporary blindness and a tendency to speak French at random. Pseudoscience is the star of the show, proven by the latest research at the Royal Society of Correspondence. A tonic may boast or endorsed by the leading minds of Prussia. The advertisements are thick with jargon, restoratives, invigorators, serums, balms, each described with just enough Latin to sound impressive and just little enough to be legally ambiguous. Brought to you by the wonders of galvanic science. Screams one particularly bold label, as if the simple act of drinking a syrup might grant you the powers of a telegraph. The best ads, though, are interactive. Send in your own testimonial for a chance to win a lifetime supply. Many did, and it shows. After 2 doses, I climbed the church tower and saw angels, confides one anonymous letter. Thank you, Doctor Mysterio, for returning my wife's laughter and my own ability to play the lute. And if you're tempted to buy, rest assured there's a guarantee. If not satisfied, simply write to our offices in Glasgow, and we shall respond post-haste. No record exists of any refund ever given. By the end of the page, you're left feeling like you could conquer the world, or at least the garden weeds. Victorian advertising was not just the engine of commerce, but of optimism, delusion, and a truly spectacular sense of style. Every bottle promised a better life. Every review, a story. The only thing more intoxicating than the tonics was the belief that, this time, the miracle might actually be true. Nothing says wellness like bathing in Dr. Pickle's medicinal salts, now with added opium. The bathwater fizzles, your skin tingles, and you emerge feeling suspiciously energetic. Is this personal hygiene, or just chemical exfoliation from the inside out? Step into the Victorian washroom, an oasis of tile, steam, and relentless self-improvement, where every bottle claims to transform your limp, grimy self into the picture of robust health and faintly floral enthusiasm. The bath is drawn, piping hot and swirling with mysterious powders poured from glass jars with labels like invigorating essence of pine, elixir of everlasting glow, and, for the adventurous, Dr. Pickle's medicinal salts, now with extra zest and trace narcotics. The instructions, written in a loopier hand than your family solicitor, encourage generous dosing for maximum results and caution if operating machinery or forming coherent sentences. You lower yourself into the steaming depths and immediately feel something. The water fizzes around you in an enthusiastic display of chemical alchemy, as clouds of lavender and licorice battle for dominance. There's a prickling at the toes, a tingling on the skin, and for a moment you're not sure if this is what cleanliness feels like, or if you're simply being gently dissolved for parts. Is this wellness, or the first stage of a transformation that ends with you joining the circus as the marvelously refreshed human salamander? For the Victorians, bathing is not just about hygiene, though given the state of 19th century London, it probably should have been. It's about purification of mind, body, and all 206 bones. The health manuals say a good soak opens the pores, expels morbid humours, and leaves the bather refreshed, spirited, and resistant to fainting at the sight of unpleasant news. Mothers pour in the salts with all the gravity of a pharmacist, each grain a promise. Cleaner, livelier, just a little more awake than strictly necessary. Children are dunked with cheerful abandon, emerging pink, slippery, and with the peculiar urge to recite Latin declensions at top volume. The family dog, regrettably included in the wellness regime, bolts from the room at the first scent of camphor and what might be eucalyptus, or possibly ammonia. Even the wallpaper seems to peel back in anticipation, hoping to avoid whatever's coming next. The packaging is a marvel of Victorian design. Swirling script, heroic claims, and artwork featuring improbably robust men shaking hands with what appear to be angels or possibly gymnasts. Cleanliness is next to godliness, one jar proclaims, now with a guarantee of liveliness and the occasional vision. The fine print, of course, warns against extended soaking, exposure to open flames, and use by those of a nervous disposition or weak character. After 20 minutes, you emerge from the bath in a state that can only be described as galvanized. Your skin glows, your eyes shine, and every cell vibrates with a new sense of purpose. The world smells sharper, the air feels charged, and you briefly contemplate alphabetizing the coal. Your family remarks on your renewed vigor, though you suspect it's really the speed at which you're rearranging the teacups. But is this truly hygiene, or just chemical exfoliation with a dash of performance art? Hard to say. The Victorians believed cleanliness was the bedrock of civilization, right up there with empire, etiquette, and breakfast syrups containing questionable stimulants. Each bath is a leap of faith, and every scrub brings you closer to the ideal. Bright-eyed, bushy, tailed, and ready for whatever horrors the city throws at you. As evening falls, the bathwater is drained, the medicinal salts carefully recapped, and your new lease on life slowly fades. at least until the next dose. But for one fleeting hour, you are as fresh as Victorian science can make you. Scrubbed, scented, and just a little bit electrified. The lesson? In the age of tonics, even washing could be an adventure, one fizzling bath at a time. And if you happen to sleepwalk or compose a symphony before dawn, well, that's just another side effect of Victorian self-care. Palpitations, night sweats, the overwhelming urge to recite Shakespeare at strangers. Don't worry, it's just the tonics working. Was there ever a polite way to ask if anyone else's hair was falling out in clumps? It's the afternoon lull, and the household is unusually quiet. A sure sign that everyone is either extremely productive or faintly terrified. You're trying to read the newspaper, but your hands are shaking so hard you might accidentally invent Morse code. Across the room, Uncle Henry is pacing like a caged tiger, muttering, "Out! Damned! Spot!" With increasing volume. Aunt Matilda fans herself by the window, cheeks flushed, eyes wide, as though she's just remembered her childhood but only in German. Side effects, the unspoken symphony of Victorian life. Of course, the advertisement said nothing about them, except to insist that any minor excitement of the nerves was merely proof that the elixir was working as intended. A little lively discomfort is the prelude to great health, promises Dr. Nimble's nerve restorer. The only thing more persistent than the heart palpitations is the collective British resolve to pretend nothing's wrong. Your own experience is typical. 1 dose brings energy, 2 doses, vision, 3 doses. You're reciting sonnets to the aspidistra and apologizing to the hat stand. At dinner, you notice half the family is sweating through their collars, and the other half is speaking in iambic pentameter. No one says a word. Politeness dictates that you ignore the tremor in your fork and focus on the conversation, which has taken a sudden turn into heated debate about the merits of living above a graveyard. Victorian denial is a finely honed art. It begins with optimism, surely. This feverish restlessness is tonic vigor. The night sweats, a healthy expulsion of noxious humors. The urge to rearrange the furniture at 2 a.m. Pure motivation, not the precursor to collapse. If anyone does mention a symptom, it's with exquisite vagueness. "Mother, do you feel peculiar?" you whisper. She pats your hand and says, "Only as much as one ought." Translation: she hasn't blinked in 40 minutes, but she'll be damned if she's the first to admit it. Children become small engines of chaos, whizzing through the halls, hair standing on end, and voices rising to a pitch previously unrecorded by science. The dog has fled to the neighbor's garden, and the canary has stopped singing altogether, possibly out of self-preservation. You start to wonder if vigor is just a polite word for unstoppable existential panic. Sometimes, the side effects aren't just physical. There's a rumor in the neighborhood that Mrs. Linton spent an entire night debating philosophy with her reflection. The next day, she took up competitive knitting and has not been seen without a scarf since. Old Mr. Tibbles wrote his memoirs on the wall in jam, and everyone agreed not to mention it ever again. Doctors, of course, a little help. When confronted with the evidence, a rash here, a bald patch there, they nod sagely and declare it the body's way of expressing gratitude. Any symptoms more alarming are blamed on the weather, or foreign cheese, or the general decline of youth. If you are concerned, the doctor will say, simply reduce your dose and eat more boiled potatoes. No one dares to ask what happens if the potatoes start sweating too. The denial extends even to fashion. Bonnets are worn lower, collars higher. If hair starts falling out, it is swept discreetly into the fire. Gloves hide trembling hands. The only clue that anything is amiss is the slightly frantic gleam in everyone's eyes and the sound of Shakespeare echoing from behind closed doors. But through it all, The Victorians soldier on, determined to see their experiment through to its logical conclusion. Tomorrow brings another bottle, another chance for wellness. And if, by some miracle, anyone feels a moment of genuine calm, it's only a sign that the next dose is overdue, because in Victorian England, side effects aren't a problem. They're a lifestyle, and nothing says thriving quite like pretending not to notice that your eyebrows are missing and your heart is tapping out the William Tell overture on your ribcage. Meet the travelling tonic salesman, a master of disguise, a lover of hats, and possibly wanted in 3 counties. His main product, Miracle Elixir X, his main selling point. What's the worst that could happen? And did he ever actually drink his own product? It's market day, and the main square is buzzing, not with the usual business of turnips and gossip, but with the unmistakable energy of a crowd about to be sold something they never knew they needed. From the back of a gaudily painted wagon, a figure emerges, part magician, part preacher, part escape artist. His waistcoat is paisley, his boots are polished, and his hat is so tall it deserves its own postal code. This is the travelling salesman, the self-declared professor of health, proprietor of wonders, and, depending on the county, person of interest. He leaps onto a barrel, twirls his cane, and with a wink and a bow, begins the show. Ladies and gentlemen, are you weary, peevish, or troubled by unexplainable ennui? Do your children bounce, your elders doze, your chickens fail to lay? I bring you salvation in a bottle, Miracle Elixir X. The crowd draws closer, equal parts skeptical and desperate. Somewhere in the audience, an actual doctor sighs into his moustache and quietly considers taking notes. The professor uncorks a bottle, waving it with the confidence of a man who has never read a warning label. The aroma hits, a blend of peppermint, kerosene, and hope. One sip, he proclaims, will restore youth, banish pain, improve the memory, and, if taken before midnight, might even help you remember where you left the horse. Laughter ripples through the crowd. The professor grins, scanning the faces for a mark, a skeptic, or just someone who looks likely to pay in cash. He gestures to his assistant, his niece or ward or someone I met on the road, depending on the version. She demonstrates the power of Miracle Elixir X, with the precision of someone who has done this in at least 3 other towns this month. A single sip, and she executes a perfect cartwheel, recites the multiplication table backward, and declares her corns entirely cured. Is it acting? Is it adrenaline? Is it just the sheer thrill of impending digestive mayhem? No one can say for sure. The pitch continues. Testimonials are read aloud, most involving mysterious gentlemen from exotic places who are now happily robust, their hair restored, and their mules more obedient than ever. A jar of coins is produced, brimming with satisfied customer contributions, mostly pennies, and the occasional foreign button. Questions are invited, but only ones that can be answered with a flourish and a creative interpretation of the word science. But does the professor drink his own product? Here, the tale becomes even murkier. Sometimes, with a flourish, he takes a dramatic swig, face impassive, smile unwavering. Other times, if you're watching closely, he swaps bottles behind his back, substituting water or perhaps a bit of cider. There are rumours in every town that, after a long day's pitching, he washes out his mouth with tea and mutters, "Never again." But the next morning, he's back at it, promising the impossible with the confidence of a man who's seen it all, done it twice, and sold the recipe for a shilling. As dusk falls, the professor and his wagon vanish, leaving behind empty bottles, high hopes, and the unmistakable feeling that you've just witnessed either the birth of modern medicine or the longest-running magic trick in history. Townsfolk compare notes. Did anyone really feel better? Or did everyone just enjoy the spectacle? Was the elixir a miracle, a menace, or just a mildly alcoholic way to pass the afternoon? In the end, the professor's secret isn't in the bottle, it's in the show. The promise that, with the right hat and enough charisma, anything can be medicine. And any problem can be solved with a little faith and a lot of what's the worst that could happen. And so the wagon rolls on. Another town, another square, another day's worth of miracle elixir X, and stories too wild to tell your doctor. Nothing says dental care like rubbing cocaine directly on your gums. Suddenly, nobody minds going to the dentist. Was toothache just an excuse to get your hands on the good stuff? Or were Victorians genuinely shocked when their molars went missing? Let's wander into the Victorian dental surgery, a room that smells like cloves, coal smoke, and unresolved childhood trauma. The wallpaper is peeling. The chair is leather, possibly. And the packed dentist's toolkit is equal parts terrifying and mysterious. On the tray beside the forceps and the oddly cheerful pamphlets, you'll spot a tiny glass vial. The label, written in a curly script with just a whiff of regret, reads, "Dr. Blythe's cocaine toothache drops. Instant relief for all ages." It's a typical afternoon in 1888. You, or more likely your unfortunate child, complain of a throbbing molar. Before you can protest, the family matriarch whisks you off to the dentist, pausing only to remind you to sit up straight and don't bite the doctor. The dentist greets you with a grin that is both reassuring and slightly manic, as if he, too, has been sampling the day's wares. The procedure is, by modern standards, pure improvisation. You're invited to open wide and think of England. With a theatrical flourish, the dentist unseals the vial and dabs a generous amount of cocaine-infused liquid onto your aching gum. The effect is instantaneous, numbness, followed by a sense of mild euphoria, followed by a suspicion that you could probably win an arm wrestling match with a steam locomotive. For the first time in history, a dentist's waiting room is filled not with sobs, but with the sound of children volunteering for root canals. The advertising claims are spectacular. Banished pain in 1 second. No more suffering, no more tears. Also suitable for dogs, elderly relations, and musicians. The testimonials are even better. Mrs. Hargreaves of Liverpool writes, "After 3 drops, my husband removed his own wisdom teeth with a boot scraper and declared it a miracle." A London newsboy, previously famous for his wails, is now rumoured to have sat through an extraction reciting poetry and offering the dentist stock advice. Of course, nobody talks about the side effects. Teeth begin to wiggle, vanish, or, in rare cases, seem to acquire new personalities. The family photo album gains a new chapter, the toothless but cheerful era. Mothers start keeping tooth jars on the mantelpiece, and more than one father invents a new whistling hobby, whether he wanted to or not. Was toothache merely an excuse? The lines blur quickly. Children develop mysterious twinges whenever the mood strikes. And adults suddenly find reasons to visit the dentist for even the mildest of twinges, bumps, or vague anxieties. A runny nose? Best see Dr. Blythe. It might be dental. Soon the whole neighbourhood is flashing dazzling, if slightly gappy, smiles, and the chemist can't keep up with demand. Dentists themselves become minor celebrities, their waiting rooms overflowing with hopefuls and the air of reckless optimism. Competing brands appear, each promising even faster numbness, longer-lasting relief, and, occasionally, a very energetic weekend. Even Queen Victoria's own physician is rumoured to have praised the virtues of the drop. though the royal molars remain classified information. But nothing good lasts forever. Eventually, a few voices begin to question whether instant dental bliss might come at a price, like the ability to chew. New guidelines are issued. Cocaine drops fall from grace, replaced by tinctures of clove oil and stern lectures about sugar. The dentist's smile becomes less manic, the waiting room a little quieter, and the world mourns the end of an era when dental care was, briefly, the highlight of the Victorian week. So next time you dread the dentist, remember the bold souls of the 19th century. They faced extraction, innovation, and numbing agents that would land you in jail today, all with a stiff upper lip, a wobbly lower jaw, and an enthusiasm for dental work the world may never see again. Picture a group of children playing musical chairs at twice the speed of sound. The parents are passed out, the cake is untouched, and the only winner is chaos. Did anyone ever try to host a sugar-free birthday? Or was that just considered child abuse? Let's open the door on a typical Victorian children's party, a phrase that, in hindsight, should come with a warning label and at least 3 liability waivers. The parlour has been transformed into an arena of anarchy. Streamers dangle from gas lamps. Toy soldiers lie trampled beneath a sea of patent leather boots, and the dog has retreated under the sofa, clutching the family cat for support. The main event is musical chairs, and it's not for the faint of heart. Fueled by the breakfast, youth elixir, and whatever questionable punch is being served, the children are running at a velocity that bends the laws of physics. The music barely begins before someone launches themselves at the nearest chair. A tangle of arms, legs, and starched pinafores. The chairs themselves, family heirlooms all, creak under the onslaught, and you're fairly certain one of them just tried to escape out the window. Parents, meanwhile, have taken up their usual positions, some slumped in armchairs with restorative sherry, others eyeing the clock and wondering if it's too soon to feign a headache. A few brave souls attempt to referee, blowing whistles and shouting instructions, only to be drowned out by a chorus of shrieks and the unmistakable sound of glass breaking in the conservatory. The birthday cake sits untouched on the table, a sugar mountain covered in hand-piped roses, its sole purpose now to witness the carnage. The entertainment is relentless. After musical chairs comes a game of blind man's bluff that turns into a spontaneous indoor marathon. Hide and seek becomes hide and never be found, as 3 children wedge themselves behind the sideboard and are only discovered days later, living on dropped crumbs and sheer adrenaline. Pin the Tail on the Donkey is abandoned after a near miss involving Aunt Edna's wig. One parent, determined to restore order, produces a tray of nerve-calming drops for the adults, not the children. Another tries to convince the assembled masses that it might be time for a nice, quiet sing-along. The suggestion is met with such uproar that the piano, sensing danger, simply gives up and loses a leg. What about the idea of a sugar-free birthday? The very notion is considered heresy, a sure way to make enemies of both children and bakers. In the Victorian imagination, sweets are not merely treats. They're essential fuel for growth, vitality, and minor property damage. Anyone daring enough to serve stewed fruit or unsweetened custard is quietly excommunicated from polite society, forced to host future parties in the garden, out of earshot. By late afternoon, the house looks like the aftermath of a small, very polite riot. Wrappers litter the floor, jam is smeared on everything at child height, and one boy has inexplicably glued a cravat to the mantelpiece. The guests are beginning to tire. Finally, though a few show no signs of stopping, still spinning in circles and reciting the entirety of the Wreck of the Hesperus from memory, the parents re-emerge, blinking, as the fog of chaos lifts. Farewells are exchanged, gifts are distributed, mostly practical. Handkerchiefs, pocket dictionaries, or, for the particularly unruly, a sternly worded book of moral tales, and the survivors are shepherded home. The house is silent at last, save for the distant sound of laughter and the ominous hum of someone still bouncing in the attic. As for the hosts, they collapse, promising themselves that next year the party will be smaller, quieter, and perhaps include a qualified nurse. But deep down they know, in the Victorian era, too much of a good thing was the whole point. And tomorrow, the real fun begins. Cleaning syrup off the ceilings and explaining to the neighbours why the goldfish is wearing a party hat. So here's to childhood, Victorian style. Fast, loud, slightly hazardous, and always, always unforgettable. You'd think with all this energy, people would be tired. But no. Insomnia is rampant. And the cure is, paradoxically, another dose of soporific syrup, guaranteed non-habit forming. Honest. Was this the original sleep hygiene fail? It's midnight in the Victorian household, and the only thing more restless than the house cat is you. You've spent the day fueled by a cocktail of invigorators, pep potions, and restorative cordials that promise to put the spring back in your step and, unfortunately, the maracas in your nervous system. Now, as the grandfather clock tolls 12, you lie wide-eyed in bed, heart thudding like a steam engine, and mind replaying the day's events at triple speed. You're not alone. Across the city, candlelit windows flicker long after the official bedtime. Fathers pace creaky floors, reciting multiplication tables. Mothers reorganize drawers by the phases of the moon. And children, allegedly asleep, can be heard inventing new verses for God Save the Queen in the next room. The family dog, having consumed a bit of nerve tonic for pets, is conducting imaginary fox hunts in its dreams, paws twitching in a flurry of midnight enthusiasm. Victorian medicine, ever the entrepreneur, has the solution ready. Soporific syrup, Dr. Dosey's nightly sedative, Professor Slumber's comforting cordial. Each promises to soothe your nerves, calm your heart, and return the natural sweetness to sleep. The catch? These miracle cures contain an alarming blend of opiates, chloroform, or just enough alcohol to ensure you'll wake up in another county. The instructions are simple. 1 generous spoonful at bedtime, or as many as you feel you deserve after a long day. The result? Sleep arrives, but not gently. One moment you're staring at the ceiling and reciting the family tree. The next, you're plunged into dreams vivid enough to qualify as unpaid night shifts. You scale Gothic rooftops, debate philosophy with talking badgers, or relive that one disastrous dinner party in endless, looping detail. Morning brings no rest, just the sour taste of regret and the distant hope that maybe tonight will be different. Conversations about sleep, or the lack of it, dominate Victorian breakfast tables. "Did you sleep well, darling?" Mother asks, bleary-eyed, and on her third cup of breakfast invigorator, "Oh, wonderfully," you lie, ignoring the cravat you've somehow tied around your leg and the strange urge to write poetry about coal delivery. Father nods sagely, announcing that his dreams involved both Napoleon and the neighbour's goose, and that he's never felt more alert or more suspicious. There's a certain denial at work. Insomnia is blamed on everything but the obvious. Maybe it's the weather. Maybe it's the magnetic influence of the new telegraph wires. Maybe you simply inherited delicate nerves from a great-uncle who once got lost in the linen closet. No one, not even the family doctor, suspects the problem might be the endless parade of tonics, syrups, and revitalizing drafts consumed from dawn to dusk. Ironically, the cure is always more of the same. Can't sleep? Try a different syrup. a heavier draft. A new herbal infusion with a name that sounds suspiciously like a racehorse. Sleep hygiene, Victorian style, means shutting the window, burning a stick of calming incense, and hoping nobody in the household takes up whistling before sunrise. As the weeks pass, bedtime becomes a battleground. Pillows are thumped, mattresses flipped, hot water bottles refilled and spilled. The household cat gives up and moves into the pantry. Even the local vicar, desperate for sleep, preaches a sermon on the virtues of mild sedatives and receives a standing ovation, mostly from people too exhausted to sit. And so, the sleepless nights continue. A grand experiment in endurance, chemistry, and denial. Was this the original sleep hygiene fail? Absolutely. But the Victorians, undaunted, greeted every morning with the same hope that the right bottle, the right syrup, and maybe just a touch more denial would finally deliver the sleep of their dreams. Until then, good night and good luck. Victorians give up booze, but not their tonics. Teetotalers are now quietly off their faces on elixir of celery and coca. Is this a moral victory? Or just a loophole big enough to drive a gin wagon through? Let's set the scene. It's Thursday night, and you're at a gathering of the local temperance society. The pamphlets are stacked, the speeches rehearsed, and the refreshments surprisingly lively. The room is abuzz, not with scandal, but with an undercurrent of jittery energy. There are the true believers, faces glowing with virtue and the unmistakable shine of celery extract. And then there's everyone else, clutching glasses of invigorating non-alcoholic elixir and laughing just a little too loudly at jokes about Methodist soup. You eye the refreshments table, where elixir of celery and coca is served in respectable glass tumblers. The label promises clarity of mind, health of body, and a spirit uplifted, but not, of course, intoxication. The host assures everyone it's free of vice and safe for children, pregnant aunts, and the vicar. The ingredients list reads like a garden salad, followed by a short visit to the pharmacy. Celery, spring water, natural stimulants, and a proprietary blend guaranteed to revive the weary. You take a sip. It's invigorating, tingling even. Someone mentions feeling positively radiant. Another whispers she hasn't slept in 3 days, but her knitting has reached supernatural speed. The children, technically forbidden from all forms of alcohol and card games, are now playing hopscotch in the hallway at Mach the Bear. Great Aunt Mildred is composing a poem to the wallpaper, and the local vicar is rehearsing his next sermon entirely in Latin. The only quiet soul is the family dog, eyeing the punch bowl with suspicion earned from last week's celery cordial incident. Of course, this is the awkward secret of Victorian temperance. While the gin and port are locked away, the house is overflowing with a different kind of spirit. The moralists congratulate themselves on their iron will, but there's a glint in their eyes and a bounce in their step that suggests virtue comes in many flavors, most of them flavored with coca leaf and just enough opiate to make the evening pass agreeably. The speeches begin, extolling the virtues of temperance and the dangers of demon drink. Heads nod, hands clap, and someone in the back starts reciting the temperance pledge in perfect French. At no point does anyone mention that the collective pulse in the room could power a small steam engine. There's no alcohol here, only an epidemic of nervous energy and, occasionally, light hallucinations. Some teetotalers, always one step ahead, invent their own medicinal tonics, syrups and cordials, restorative bitters, and herbal drops that would make a pharmacist sweat. The goal is moral improvement, but the side effect is a community that hasn't had a full night's sleep since the repeal of the Corn Laws. Rumour spreads of a group in Bristol that banned all stimulants, only to discover their weekly meeting was now indistinguishable from a séance conducted at warp speed. Is this a moral victory? Well, the gin wagon's in the barn, but the loophole is big enough to host a village fete. The line between medicine and recreation is as thin as a cucumber sandwich. And as for the local authorities, they're just happy the streets are full of cheerful, if slightly twitchy citizens. By evening's end, the room is a whirl of polite enthusiasm. The host thanks everyone for their dedication to temperance and hands out bottles of celery and coca tonic as party favors. People walk home in high spirits, hearts racing, minds buzzing with moral superiority and just a hint of chemical encouragement. In the end, Victorian temperance is less about what you avoid and more about what you discover along the way. And in this era, what you discover, sometimes, is that the real party is happening right under your nose, in a glass marked non-alcoholic. Cheers to that. Medicinal wines aren't just for communion, they're for breakfast, lunch, and, in emergencies, brushing your teeth. Was everyone just a tiny bit tipsy, or did the Victorians finally discover the secret to creative accounting? It's a sunny Victorian morning, and you are greeted at the breakfast table not just by porridge and kippers, but by a decanter of Dr. Bromley's fortifying wine tonic, recommended by clergy, physicians, and at least 2 retired colonels. The label is a masterpiece of understatement. Invigorating, strengthening, promotes digestion and spiritual contentment. It doesn't say outright, contains more alcohol than a gin palace. But the glint in Mother's eye as she pours her morning dose speaks volumes. You sip your tonic under the approving gaze of both parents and family portraits. It's sweet, warming, and has just enough of a kick to turn Monday into what day is it again. This is not just wine, you're assured. It's restorative, medicinal, practically sacramental. Children are allowed half a teaspoon for the nerves. And there are whispers that grandfather's miraculous recovery from gout had less to do with prayer, and more with 2 generous glasses at breakfast, 3 at supper, and a suspiciously cheerful attitude during board games. No Victorian household is complete without a few bottles of medicinal wine. There's iron tonic wine for the anemic, nerve-calming claret for the anxious, and revitalizing Madeira for when the sun goes in and everyone gets morose about the state of the drains. Guests arrive and are immediately offered a cordial for your health, regardless of the time, the weather, or whether they came seeking actual medicine or just directions to the railway station. The science is, to put it kindly, creative. Advertisements claim restorative wines are fortified with vital elements, gentle stimulants, and the subtle balm of the grape. Testimonials from satisfied invalids and clergymen of good repute abound. After 1 week on Dr. Elworthy's revivifying Burgundy, I finished my memoirs and learned the accordion, writes a reverend in the Morning Post. The ingredients list is a mix of botanicals, secret extracts, and, in some cases, a hefty dose of coca leaf, which ensures even the most jaded soul will feel not just revived, but ready to tile the roof before tea. The popularity of medicinal wines creates an entirely new class of social behavior. Afternoon tea becomes afternoon wine tasting for wellness. Book clubs are suddenly very well attended, with debates about Dickens growing more passionate as the decanters empty. Children invent elaborate excuses for their digestive problems, and the family doctor develops a mysterious fondness for house calls around 4 o'clock. Inevitably, the lines blur between treatment and celebration. Bottles are hidden in sewing baskets, behind bookshelves, and, during especially difficult winters, in the water pitcher. Dinner parties end with everyone a shade brighter, if not a little wobbly, and the butler invents new euphemisms for restorative top-ups. The most popular? Would Madame care for another dose of spiritual fortitude? As for the books, ledgers, and household accounts, well, it's amazing how creative one can be with the numbers after a glass or three. Did the Victorians finally invent creative accounting? Or was it just that after so much medicine, the cost of sherry glasses and fine Bordeaux seemed to vanish from the balance sheet altogether? If questioned, every housekeeper swears on her honour that the wine was strictly for health, with only occasional side effects, such as singing at breakfast or impromptu naps beneath the rose bushes. Of course, not everyone was fooled forever. Reformers eventually noticed that half the city was cheerfully tipsy before lunch. Temperance societies campaigned for tonic honesty, and doctors found themselves writing more prescriptions for fresh air and water, with perhaps a little less burgundy. Still, for a brief, sparkling moment, the Victorian age was one where a glass of wine was the answer to everything. Medicine, mirth, and maybe a tiny bit of mischief, all in one bottle. If you woke up in the morning with a song in your heart, a spring in your step, and no idea where your socks were, you could always trust that science, and another glass, would see you through until supper. Ladies are expected to faint gracefully, then recover with a quick sniff of restorative salts, now 40% ammonia, 20% opiates. Was Victorian etiquette just a complex way to avoid admitting you'd taken 3 doses of straight-up narcotics before lunch? Step into a Victorian drawing room, where etiquette is the real head of household. The walls are lined with silk, the air is thick with perfume and unspoken grievances, and everyone is walking the tightrope between composure and chemical chaos. Here, a headache isn't just an inconvenience, it's a potential scandal. You are to wilt delicately onto the chaise longue, one limp hand upon your brow, signalling, "I am unwell, but still fabulous." The family physician is summoned, but not before your best friend leans in and offers her own vial of restorative salts. It's a heady blend that would strip paint and cure both ennui and the memory of last night's charades. The ritual is performed with theatrical precision. Inhale deeply, exhale with a sigh, and allow the eyes to flutter open as though you've just seen the face of the Queen herself. Or, at minimum, a very impressive tray of tea sandwiches. Your admirers applaud your recovery. Your secret? The salts do most of the work, while society takes care of the applause. Victorian etiquette manuals, those hefty doorstops of social wisdom, devote entire chapters to the art of the faint. Always collapse away from the fire, they warn, and never faint in a manner that disturbs the piano tuner. Most importantly, recover only when everyone is watching, preferably with a clever remark about the weather or your cousin's disastrous poetry. But behind the lace and manners, a different drama unfolds. The contents of those pretty bottles are far from innocent. Restorative salts, soothing drops, fainting vinegar, all euphemisms for chemical cocktails that could stun a horse. Etiquette is the smokescreen. The real goal is to maintain your dignity while riding a pharmaceutical roller coaster. Mother's headache remedy might double as a sleep aid. Aunt Cordelia's special tea is rumoured to have set her curtains on fire twice. Men aren't immune either. If you're a gentleman, the answer to headache is a quick dash to the study for a bracing sip of tonic and a brisk walk around the garden, if you can find the door. But you must never admit defeat, unless, of course, you can spin it into a rousing anecdote for your club friends. Got lost in the hedge maze again, old chap, but it cured my neuralgia. Polite society has a code for everything. To admit fatigue outright is a breach of decorum. To faint artfully is social capital. No one asks what's in your bottle, only how well it works. Ladies discreetly compare remedies, each one more outlandish than the last. Mine's French, comes in a velvet pouch. My apothecary says it's approved by the Empress of Austria. "Oh, mine's just gin." But don't tell mother. All the while, headaches multiply like rabbits at a carrot festival. The constant pressure to maintain appearances, dressing, hosting, entertaining, fainting on cue, would drive anyone to desperate measures. But the rules persist. Never show true pain. Always recover with grace. And never, ever let your wig slip. In the background, reformers whisper about the dangers of these remedies. Doctors publish pamphlets warning of addiction. But no one wants to give up their little helper. Social success is built on a foundation of concealed chaos. And no one wants to be the first to blink. So the cycle continues. Headaches, salts, applause, denial. Etiquette manuals become bestsellers, and the average household owns more bottles than books. In a society that prizes composure above all else, the real miracle is that anyone gets through the afternoon without fainting from the sheer weight of expectation. And if you wake up tomorrow with a headache, you know what to do. Reach for the nearest bottle, faint like a pro, and carry on. Because in Victorian England, survival wasn't just about following the rules. It was about knowing exactly when to break them, and which salts to sniff when you did. Why buy a tonic when you can make one? The recipe: 2 cups gin, a pinch of opium, and whatever's left in the medicine cabinet. Did Victorians invent homeopathy, or just discover the upper limits of wishful thinking? Welcome to the Victorian kitchen, where innovation and desperation collide. The air is thick with the scent of herbs, fear, and just a whiff of spilled cough syrup. Mother is hunched over the table, sleeves rolled, brows furrowed, wielding a wooden spoon like a conductor's baton. It's tonic time, a moment of homegrown chemistry that can only be described as bravely optimistic and possibly a low-level misdemeanor. You may wonder why anyone would risk it. After all, the pharmacy is just down the street, brimming with bottles promising vigor, health, and the occasional minor hallucination. But a true Victorian is thrifty and suspicious. If you can read a recipe, own a teapot, and ignore the periodic table, surely you can brew up a cure for what ails you. Besides, what's more comforting than a concoction lovingly crafted from whatever happened to be lying around since last Christmas? The process begins with a base spirit. Gin is preferred, but rum, brandy, or that suspicious bottle of plum wine from Uncle Reginald's failed business venture will do. To this, Mother adds a generous handful of dried herbs, chamomile for calm, peppermint for vigor, and maybe a little valerian for dreams you'll remember for years. Then comes the magic touch, a spoonful of honey to soothe the throat, a drop of laudanum to soothe everything else, and a splash of whatever's left in the medicine cabinet. Cod liver oil? Why not? Arsenic drops? If it's good enough for the Victorians, it's probably fine in moderation. Once the ingredients are combined, the mixture is heated gently on the stove, just enough to activate the essences, as Mother says, and possibly set off the fire alarm. The resulting aroma is formidable. Eyes water, sinuses clear, and the cat leaves the room for the first time all week. But in the true spirit of Victorian self-reliance, nobody hesitates to try a spoonful. Tasting the brew is a family affair. Each member braces for impact, faces contorting in a ballet of regret and hope. Does it work? Who can say? Sometimes the results are miraculous. Coughs stop, headaches vanish, and, for a brief, shining moment, everyone forgets the dampness in the walls. Other times, the only miracle is surviving until morning. Word of new home remedies spreads faster than a London fog. Neighbours swap recipes and compare notes. I use nutmeg and fennel. My children haven't slept in days. But they're so polite. I find that a dash of gin and a whisper of opium will cure nearly anything, except maybe a broken arm. Don't forget to label the bottle this time, dear. Last week I mistook your sleeping draught for the furniture polish, and now the piano glistens but hasn't played a note. Disaster is always lurking. The line between cure and catastrophe is thin. One batch is so strong it strips the pattern off the wallpaper. Another is so weak, even the mice refuse to drink it. There are tales of home remedies so potent that guests wake up 3 towns over, or so ineffective that the only effect is a lasting distrust of all things herbal. The true genius of the Victorian homemaker isn't in the brewing, it's in the storytelling afterwards. If the tonic didn't work, well, clearly the illness was simply incurable by mortal means. But there's a camaraderie in these disasters. Families bond over failed experiments, and neighbours drop by to trade gossip and antidotes. There's a pride in doing it yourself, even if you have to explain to the local doctor why the curtains are now missing, and father insists he's discovered the secret to perpetual motion. In the end, Victorian DIY medicine isn't just about chasing a cure, it's about hope, ingenuity, and the firm belief that tomorrow's batch will be better. And if not, there's always the real pharmacy, only slightly more reliable than your kitchen, and, let's be honest, a lot less fun. Behind closed doors, even the physicians are guzzling their own product. Is this professional research, or the first documented case of do as I say, not as I do? And did anyone ever try to treat withdrawal with more tonic? Step softly down the gaslit corridor of the Victorian clinic, past the heavy velvet drapes and shelves sagging with miracle cures, and you may catch a rare sight indeed. The good doctor, coat unbuttoned, monocle askew, quietly helping himself to a generous measure of revitalizing brain elixir. The practice of medicine, after all, is exhausting work. One must stay sharp, preferably with a little help from one's own supply. It starts innocently enough. The physician's day is a parade of delicate constitutions, dramatic fainting, and nervous complaints that all require sympathy, Latin phrases, and a bottle or two of something strong. After the 5th house call and the 3rd case of wandering spleen, a doctor might reasonably reach for a restorative. Purely for research, he insists, decanting a syrup with a colour not found in nature. A man cannot advise the public without first-hand knowledge of the wares, can he? Professional curiosity quickly becomes habit. 1 dash for clarity, 2 for insight, and a 3rd for courage before Mrs. Hargreaves' weekly update on her bunions. The irony, of course, is that the doctor's own health begins to take on a certain experimental quality. Minor tremors, sudden bursts of inspiration, the ability to recite anatomy textbooks backward. These are the marks of a medical mind under the influence of progress. At meetings of the local medical society, a chorus of coughs and enthusiastic endorsements of Professor Sparks' medico-vivifying tincture can be heard over the clink of glasses and the rustle of prescription pads. Among the profession, discretion is key. After hours, doctors gather in back rooms, swapping not just theories but bottles. Have you tried the new Hungarian extract? I find the French syrup best for melancholy, but it plays havoc with my punctuation. Beware the German nerve drops. They're liable to make you fluent in Danish. The laughter is loud, the research ongoing, and the line between treatment and recreation fades with each new blend. But what happens when the tonic wears off? The answer, as it turns out, is more tonic. Withdrawal is just a word for an interval between doses. Headaches, fatigue, the shakes. These are merely signs that the body is ready for the next experiment. And so, with the resolve of a man determined to remain both doctor and patient, he prescribes himself another round, notes the effects in his journal. Vision doubled, handwriting improved. See, and returns to work with new confidence and a slightly wobblier gait. Patients, meanwhile, are blissfully unaware that their trusted medical advisor is living in a permanent state of mild euphoria. If anything, they marvel at his tireless energy and optimistic bedside manner. "He's always so cheerful," Mrs. Moffat confides, "and once sang Rule Britannia during my ear examination." The pharmacy profits soar, and local chemists learn to stock an extra case or two of the physician's blend behind the counter, just in case. Occasionally, reality intrudes. A patient catches the doctor taking just a nip during a consultation, or the family cat is found asleep on the stethoscope after sampling a spilt tonic. Questions arise, but the answers are always the same. Science demands sacrifice, and never ask what's in the brown bottle. In the end, the Victorian doctor's legacy is a blend of science, self-experimentation, and bravado. "Do as I say" is followed closely by, and sometimes as I do, but only if you can handle it. Medicine advances, bottles empty, and the eternal dance between curiosity and caution continues, one sip at a time. And as you drift off tonight, remember, sometimes the real prescription for progress is a little too much enthusiasm, and a doctor brave enough to test every drop himself. As the bodies pile up, some bright spark wonders, should we maybe test these products first? Enter the Pure Food and Drug Act, about 40 years too late. Was anyone actually surprised when their favorite tonic was suddenly illegal? It's the dawn of a new century, and the world is beginning to suspect that perhaps not every brown bottle in the cupboard is a miracle. Reports trickle in from all corners. Mrs. Quimby's restorative drops turned out to be mostly turpentine and hope. Old Mr. Pierce's invigorating cordial was found to contain a dash of mercury, a pinch of arsenic, and, for flavour, a sprig of peppermint. The newspapers, once filled with glowing testimonials from S. Badger, Esquire, now devote entire columns to the mysterious ailments of the tonic generation. The stories are everywhere. Children who once bounced off the walls now sit in a quiet daze. Fathers who swore by their vitalizing syrups start showing symptoms that even the family dog recognizes as not right. The local chemist, previously the most popular man in town, now wears an air of nervous respectability and keeps a careful eye on the inventory, just in case the authorities pay a visit. Regulation arrives not with a bang, but with a very official, very serious document stamped in triplicate and carried by a clerk who has never smiled in his life. The Pure Food and Drug Act is passed, and suddenly, every bottle, box, and powder is under suspicion. Inspectors descend upon the shops, poking at labels, dipping suspicious liquids onto litmus paper, and sniffing at ointments as if hoping to discover the meaning of life, or at least the source of that odd buzzing in their left ear. The response is immediate, and, for some, traumatic. Overnight, trusted brands vanish from shelves, replaced by stern government pamphlets titled "So You've Been Drinking Strychnine, a Guide." Housewives stare in disbelief as their cherished headache elixir is declared illegal. "But it's what got me through the children's piano lessons," they protest. The pharmacists, forced to comply, sweep bottles into bins and exchange guilty glances. Did you know what was in it? Did anyone? Do you think we can still sell the empty jars? The town gossips have a field day. Rumours fly about which neighbour is hoarding the last of the good stuff in their cellar. Clandestine trades are arranged, 2 jars of Invigorator for a tin of soothing syrup, delivered in the dead of night, lest the neighbourhood busybody take note and report you to the new Board of Public Decency. Some take the news in stride. "Well, I always said you can have too much of a good thing," remarks Mr. Wigglesworth, as he pours his last dram and toasts progress. Others are outraged. convinced that civilization itself will grind to a halt without Vim drops and Professor Zinnia's universal balm. A few braver souls attempt homebrew alternatives, resulting in an unfortunate spike in kitchen fires and a new appreciation for simply having a cup of tea. The medical community reacts with mixed feelings. Doctors who once prescribed coca cordial for everything from gout to marital strife now shuffle their feet and recommend rest, fresh air, and the occasional boiled potato. Some write lengthy letters to the Lancet, defending their beloved remedies as scientifically interesting, if not entirely predictable. Others simply go on extended holiday until the fuss dies down. Was anyone truly surprised? Maybe not. Deep down, everyone sensed that a syrup that promised to cure fatigue, baldness, and the common cold was, at best, a little optimistic. Still, when the dust settles and the shelves are restocked with government-approved medicine, there's a wistful sigh across the nation. The era of anything goes is over. The age of accountability has arrived. And so the Victorians move on, slightly healthier, definitely more suspicious, and still hoping the next miracle cure is just around the corner. After all, hope, unlike cocaine, is still legal. The sun rises over a household full of empty bottles, lost memories, and vague apologies. Breakfast is quiet. Everyone's wearing sunglasses. Was it all worth it for one night of vigor? Or was this just the world's longest, weirdest bender? It's dawn, and the house is eerily still, except for the soft clink of glass as you gingerly step over a small pyramid of tonic bottles left scattered like trophies from a particularly ambitious science fair. The family is assembled at the breakfast table, but the usual chaos has been replaced by a silence so profound you can hear the toast going cold. Someone tries to butter a scone and misses by a good inch, staring off into the middle distance as if expecting divine guidance. Your own head throbs with the memory of last night's optimism, now replaced by a suspicious ringing noise and a deep suspicion of sunlight. The taste in your mouth suggests that you attempted to brush your teeth with restorative wine, and you're only 50% sure you didn't write a strongly worded letter to Parliament sometime around 2 a.m. If so, you hope it was at least spelled correctly. Mother, whose usual morning routine is brisk and decisive, now moves with the speed and dignity of a glacier. Her hair is pinned up in a style best described as experimental. She winces at the sound of the kettle boiling and blinks at her own reflection in the teapot. Father, meanwhile, sits behind a newspaper held upside down, hoping nobody will ask him about the spontaneous poetry reading in the garden or the fate of his second-best waistcoat. The children are quieter than usual, which is always cause for concern. One clutches a pillow and mutters about never mixing pep potion with restorative syrup again. Another eyes the dog with suspicion, as though the animal is somehow to blame for the half-finished hopscotch court drawn in chalk across the dining room walls. Even the family pets are subdued. The cat sleeps with its tail draped over its eyes, and the dog refuses to come out from beneath the settee. The house itself feels hungover. There's a faint, sticky residue on every surface, and a gentle breeze through the kitchen window carries with it the scent of eucalyptus, regret, and possibly a hint of formaldehyde. The cupboard door hangs open, displaying rows of bottles that seemed magical the night before, and now look like evidence. The labels, so reassuring in the evening, now read like ominous warnings. Guaranteed to invigorate, best taken with caution, do not operate heavy machinery. You wonder if managing a family qualifies as machinery, and suspect the answer is yes. Breakfast is a subdued affair. Gone are the spirited debates, the clattering cutlery, the enthusiastic plans for the day ahead. In their place are dark mutterings, whispered pledges to never again, and the sort of awkward small talk usually reserved for people who've just survived a minor shipwreck together. A few brave souls try to revive themselves with another dash of tonic. After all, hair of the dog is a time-honored tradition. But the effect is disappointing, producing only a temporary sense of déjà vu and a renewed desire to nap beneath the table. As the morning drags on, memories begin to resurface. Fragments of wild optimism, dubious dance moves, and philosophical debates with the umbrella stand. Apologies are exchanged with the solemnity of a peace treaty. Sorry about the lamp. No, I quite liked the poetry. We just won't do it in Latin next time. Was it all worth it? In the clear, pale light of day, you're not sure. Maybe one night of vigor was a fair price for a lifetime of stories and a renewed respect for moderation. Or maybe, just maybe, the real miracle was that everyone survived to have another go next weekend. For now, though, you pour another cup of tea, pull your sunglasses down, and resolve to keep the bottles on a higher shelf. After all, history may be written by the victors, but it's survived by the hangovers. Not every tonic had to contain a walloping dose of illegal stimulants. Sometimes, the magic ingredient was pure, undiluted optimism. Was the secret to Victorian health simply believing hard enough that you felt fantastic? Or was the only real side effect a slightly emptier wallet and a persistent twitch in your left eyebrow? Step into a parlor lined with velvet and hope, where every side table hosts at least one half-finished bottle promising vigor, radiance, and a new lease on life. The advertisements shout about secret formulas and invigorating infusions, but sometimes the most powerful potion is the power of suggestion itself, mixed with a hint of self-delusion and a sprinkle of social pressure. You pour yourself a glass of Professor Pemberton's marvelous mixture, an amber syrup that tastes mostly of burnt sugar and possibility. There's nothing in it but water, caramel, and a little lemon peel, but the label is convincing, and your neighbor swears her cousin's uncle's rheumatism disappeared after just 3 bottles. You sip, close your eyes, and will your nerves to settle. After all, what is health if not a state of mind, preferably a mind that believes in miracle cures and never reads the fine print? The Victorians excelled at the art of the hopeful swallow. Some claimed immediate relief from melancholy, others a surge of energy or a return of the glow of youth. It didn't matter that half the remedies contained nothing more dangerous than the average pudding. To the true believer, every tingle, twitch,